Born on March 25, 1914, Norman Borlaug would go on to be credited with saving more human lives than any human being ever, which is pretty impressive. He was born outside of Cresco, Iowa on a small farm, where he spent his first few years in a one-room schoolhouse in his education, before going on to Cresco High School. He would graduate from Cresco High School and then attend the University of Minnesota. But if you peel back the layers, there's a little bit more to Norman Borlaug than just that basic storyline. Norman Borlaug worked hard on a farm and enjoyed many outdoor activities in the time, from hunting and fishing, and learning that strong foundation of a work ethic from the farm. But in high school, he also participated in a lot of activities. Borlaug was part of the football, baseball, and wrestling programs at Cresco, and he specifically excelled in wrestling, where he was offered the opportunity to wrestle at the University of Minnesota. Upon taking his entrance exam, though, to the University of Minnesota, he did not pass. And so Norman Borlaug got a second opportunity and went back to the University of Minnesota, where he participated on the wrestling scholarship and would make it to the semifinals in the Big Ten Conference. He would travel across the state in exhibition matches, promoting the sport of wrestling within Minnesota. Norman Borlaug would later recall how wrestling gave him a sense of toughness. He knew when he stepped on the mat that he could compete with anybody. Norman Borlaug would work as a microbiologist for DuPont. And in 1944, the Rockefeller Foundation approached him, and he moved to Mexico, where he would work on different strains of wheat. Now, this is very interesting, because at that time in our world, there was actually a fear that our population in some areas would become too great to feed, and that people would basically be starved to death. Poverty throughout Latin America and the Middle East and Africa was rampant across our world. And so Norman Borlaug in Mexico, he worked on a specific strain of wheat that was rust resistant and a dwarf wheat. And what a dwarf wheat meant is a smaller plant. And so it was less likely to fall down in wind and storms, and more resilient in the environment. He also developed in Mexico a new process called shuttle breeding. And the research advances he made in this strain of wheat led him to be the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. Norman Borlaug would be basically the father of the Green Revolution. And he would take his education, he would take what he had learned in the field from his hands-on application into growing these various varieties of wheat, and he would take it to India, to Pakistan. And when he was well into his 80s, he would take the Green Revolution to Africa, always working to help stop poverty and starvation across the world. In 1986, Norman Borlaug would start the World Food Prize. And the World Food Prize is the equivalent of the Nobel Peace Prize for the world. And it goes to those that are making advances in food production across the world. Now, here in Iowa locally, the World Food Prize, we don't give it really as much attention as it truly deserves. Outside of our borders and outside of our country, the World Food Prize is held on a huge platform and has done tremendous amount to benefit the growth of food production across the world. My challenge for you is to look at Norman Borlaug a little more in depth and what his product and his research accomplished. Look into the Middle East, look into Africa, look into the various regions of the world where his technology in seed production and wheat production would feed the masses. Norman Borlaug was a unique individual. With humble beginnings in Cresco, Iowa, he never forgot where he was from. And more importantly, his experience as a student athlete at Cresco High School at the University of Minnesota, he took that same approach of discipline and work ethic into his professional career and made an impact that his ripple effect is still felt today. One other little interesting fact about Norman Borlaug that a lot of people don't realize, while his family was living in Mexico and he was working in the fields, he wanted to bring a little bit of a sense of normalcy and a sense of home to Mexico. And so Norman Borlaug started a Little League program in Mexico. Coaching his son twice a week and in the games, he made sure that the American pastime continued.